to understand that the reptilians, first of all, there's many species of reptilians. So you have to kind of define your terms, decide who you're really talking about. And once you do that, then you have to figure out, which race you're dealing with. There's a specific race called the reptoids that are reptilian human hybrid reptilians that are apparently, at least according to Mark Richards, the most diabolical. And they have bases underground in Africa, specifically, is talked about, and probably various places around the globe as well. I can tell you that they're not leaving, and that reptilians believe they were here first. So they believe that they own, in essence, they own the earth. And they also have genetically invaded our species and changed our genome.
Yes.
So they're genetic engineers par excellence. They're known for this. And so this is where you get temples. You know why they go into the Middle East and are asking our armies to actually go and destroy the temples. What they're destroying is the evidence of the reptilian invasion on planet Earth, and that was there even before us, and then humans basically were their slaves.
Let me ask you one last question, then I want to move on, because I want people to buy your book, The Rebel Gene, and also go to your website.
As talk about the reptoids, because they are an important part of this. And I guess basically what I would like to do is somehow bring us all full circle again. So if these creatures land on Earth, surface, we don't run out in fear, and we don't suddenly grab onto these old pieces of garbage that was handed to us by these religious controllers who are really manipulating us. I know I'm going to get hell for saying that. I'll be shaking hands with Jordan down there, I guess. Beings being able to move through matter. How many of us have heard that coming out of the UFO fields, right? They walk through a wall. These creatures, it's almost like you could see through them. There's something about the way that they can manipulate the matter of their own bodies in order to move through physical substances, or perhaps even shapeshift. In the secret...
Quite funny that, and that was Pink Floyd, so you picked the right band to ask. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Luis. I'm from Mexico City.
Yeah.
So when I was younger, we used to go play soccer outside, and we used to have a big volcano outside of Mexico City.
Yeah.
So back in the days, on the 90s, early 90s, we used to see things coming up from the sky, going inside of the volcano.
Yeah.
Is that possible?
Well, they do disappear through solid rock. I mean, what they think is going on is that there's an awful lot of underground installations, but why there's such an attraction to volcanoes? Some of this will be like ball lightning type effect. So when you put a lot of ash into the air, you get what we call electrostatic releases and ball lightning. So some of those that you see in the videos, if they're very short-lived, will be ball lightning. But there are craft definitely going into the ground, and there's lots of reports. I mean, I've talked to people who've witnessed it, and it's very disturbing to watch a UFO go through the ground. Yeah. But it's almost certainly that the technology they use allows them to have bases underground, and most people have a suspicion that the undersea bases and the underground bases are accessed directly through solid rock, which is something we can't even imagine. So you're watching, there's probably a base there if you figure it out.
Back in the days, it was happening very often.
Yeah.
And then for some reason it just stopped.
Well, they often abandon. This was the Friendship case in Italy, which is a famous case from the 50s through to the 70s, and they abandon bases routinely. So it's interesting whether that happened, but there may well be. I mean, I'm pretty certain that underground and undersea bases, there's one off Cuba that's well known. There's a number of them, and people don't realize how massive these installations can be underground. We probably share the planet, but it's so difficult. Like, people think that's mad, we'll think, at least you've got your own mind. I mean, Mexico's a great place.
Yeah.
And I think there's Arturo Robles, or whatever his name is. He's a great videographer. Have you ever tried getting in contact with him if you're ever in Mexico?
We saw his show.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been on different shows, but he believes that whatever happened.
Anoche a las 8:38, la cámara fija que Televisa tiene dirigida hacia el volcán Popocatépetl captó esta imagen. Vean, está impresionante Fíjese con mucha atención, se trata de un objeto no identificado que aparece, ahí está apareciendo, en la pantalla del lado superior derecho. El objeto cruza el cielo, avanza hacia el cráter del volcán, parece que da como un pequeño giro y después aparentemente cae dentro del volcán generando una luminosidad, sale como esta luz cuando entra el objeto. Hasta ahora se desconoce de qué se trata. Aquí estuvimos toda la noche sacando conclusiones, no llegamos a nada, pero bueno, usted saque sus conclusiones porque realmente está muy curiosa esta imagen.
Weird World TV.
Popocatépetl llevaba varios días tranquilos hasta ayer por la tarde cuando registró una fuerte exhalación. Pero tras la exhalación se registró algo que no sé qué sea, no sé cómo explicarlo. Vamos a verlo juntos. Miren lo que cae en el cráter. Esta es la exhalación y luego es esto. Ahí está esto que cae en el cráter. Ante esto no se lo presenté ayer porque buscamos especialistas que hasta hoy nos dieron estas explicaciones. Miren.
Estas son imágenes captadas por la cámara de Televisa, ubicada en el Cerro Alzomoni, muy cerca del volcán Popocatépetl. Según especialistas, se trata de un objeto de aproximadamente 1 kilómetro de largo por 200 metros de ancho. No se puede apreciar de dónde viene, pero con una velocidad mayor a la de un avión, pareciera que entra al cráter. Así se ve de cerca. Es un cuerpo cilíndrico, se aprecia un exceso de brillo en su cara frontal y una sombra. Acudimos con la astrónoma de la UNAM y miembro de la Unión Astronómica Internacional que ha revisado a detalle los objetos luminosos vistos en la zona hace 15 días y en abril pasado, cuando el volcán registró mayor actividad.
Una cosa interesante en todo esto es que va en caída. Sería todavía más espectacular si fuera en subida, Cuando es algo que va cayendo, como que hay más causas naturales que cuando va subiendo.
Descartó que fuera material incandescente lanzado por el volcán y que regresa en caída libre, debido a que no se aprecia un camino de luz trazado por el cuerpo en movimiento, misma situación que descarta la posibilidad de que sea un meteorito. Llama la atención de los astrónomos ciertas características de este objeto. Por un lado, que tenga una línea bien definida, que los bordes sean brillantes y de diferentes colores, pero sobre todo que no se aprecie la interacción con la atmósfera ni con los gases del volcán.
Imagínense un cilindro de 1 kilómetro de largo y de 200 metros de ancho, o sea, 2 calles de ancho y 1 kilómetro de largo, en una zona donde hay, aparte de la atmósfera terrestre, pues están todas estas exhalaciones, gases y todo caliente.
Se esperaría un fenómeno explosivo, como más gases, humo, una luz diferente y sonido. Nada se ve ni se escucha. La especialista aseguró que incluso puede tratarse de un defecto del video.
Que muchos de los píxeles de la imagen están saturados, entonces como que fuera un rayón o algo, como que pareciera que no es parte del video original.
Una sola imagen para los científicos, dijo la astrónoma, no es suficiente para hacer una aseveración.
Ajá. Es un fenómeno interesante, hay que estar atentos, pero se necesita confirmación.
Saraí Méndez, Noticieros Televisa.
Bueno, lo vimos ahora en cámara lenta. Así es como lo registró nuestra cámara que está ahí permanentemente. No, eso es en cámara lenta. Así lo registró exactamente así. Bien, entonces este es el registro original. Bueno, el fin de semana buscaremos mayores explicaciones con especialistas.
It's you basically it's the veil is very thin there and people can see invading species, etc., and so on going on in Crimea. So there's something to do with Ukraine.
Let me just point out that
in this area.
Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he plans a new Israel in the Ukraine.
Right. And that's not an accident. You know, you have to keep in mind that behind Israel are the Anunnaki. And so, you know, that doesn't mean that all Israelis are, you know, reptilians, but it does mean that there is a relationship there. And this gets back to Sumeria and that invading race. Now, what happened with the Anunnaki is they are humanoids. So they were in essence Pleiadians, which we are related directly to them. And so, but they are a race of humanoids that were taken over by the Draco and became reptilian human hybrids in essence. So this is a complex story. Right now, if you look at the political situation, you look at what Trump and team are doing, you're looking at the takeover and the takedown of so-called takedown of the cabal, you have to look at the alien human relationships that we have on and off planet, because that's the key. That's the absolute key. And unfortunately, I'm the only one talking about that.
You know, Carrie, I don't want to shortchange you, because I think you are the only one.
The reptilians and grays are dealing on the very 3D physical level, and they have infiltrated our militaries and made deals with them, and we've exchanged technologies, etc. And the reptilians are very, specifically the reptoids, are very active in places like Africa and the Middle East, establishing bases, taking humans off planet, for the various uses we talked about before, etc. So it kind of depends on who you're dealing with, what the aspects of the war. But anytime you see a war on Earth, what I've found out after all these years of investigating is that all of those wars have an ET basis. So these are not just wars between humans, and you're able to go to other dimensions. And if you've ever gone to Sedona and you go to the portals, if you want to know what a portal is like, go to Sedona, although they have them all over the world. And in fact, rivers and lakes are natural portals. So the energy, you can feel it. I happen to be an earth sensitive. I can feel these things in my hands. I could walk around and tell you where on your property there might be a portal, for example. So I just re-interviewed John Edmonds, who lives on a ranch that's located on top of a military base in Arizona that's also being shared by the Ashtar Command, which is an off-planet race. And he has a tremendous number of portals on his property where beings are always coming through and basically disturbing their life in a multitude of ways. So what we're really talking about is your frequency and your ability to then go from one dimension to another and so on. So this is the kind of thing the military is working on very seriously. Again, teleportation is going through a portal or stargate. The Egyptian pyramids are stargates. The largest pyramid is a very famous stargate. And these stargates exist in strategic places around the globe. You could think of a stargate as being basically augmented. It's like a portal on steroids, let's say, and that beings can come and go. Some portals or wormholes will only allow access one way. And other limitations. The reason they took out Saddam Hussein is because of the portals that exist in Iraq. There are portals, very key stargates and portals in the mountains between Iraq and Iran. This is why our U.S. military will never leave Iraq. That's a fact.
There's portals all over the world. One of the ones I can talk about, it's an underground facility in New Mexico, and it's a very large building. Inside these buildings, they can fly drones. Very large facility that has quarter-mile stretch inside. And they can fly these drones into the portals and program them to fly back out. And they're trying to figure out this highway of portals through the universe. They're trying to map that now. And that has to do with a lot of the ley lines of the universe. There's a lot of ley lines that are not just here on Earth, but they go from planet to planet and to solar system to solar system. And these are energy highways that extraterrestrials use and that we use to get us amongst the stars.
I learned more and more, and the more I learned, the more I wanted to know. I wanted to know what the military knew. I wanted to know what the politicians and the scientists knew. What they knew in '64 was only the tip of the iceberg. I wanted to know what it was all about. My initial research as the military was, who are they, where are they from, and why are they here? And that was my impetus and my drive for very many years. I learned very quickly that there was no simple, easy way to learn anything about this, that there was no discipline that I could ever follow that would give me a clear and understandable picture of what was happening. I found out most of our great scientists were specialists in their fields, historians, psychologists, atmospheric physicists, whatever, atomic physicists, nuclear physicists. Every one of our great scientists have this narrow specialty field that they spend their lives working on, and they know very often very little about what's out on the sides. They know their discipline, they study it, they devote their life to it. But they don't necessarily have the time and the discipline to broaden their perspective and broaden their view. Well, as a trained intelligence analyst, a man who has no numbers or letters behind his name at all, a man who at that time had not even finished his university training, I was a rabid nut about trying to find the answers to this. And as I said, I'd been trained to be an intelligence analyst. So I began to ply my skill as an intelligence analyst to this research. I found that I had to dig into history, I had to dig into philosophy, literature, mythology, anthropology, geology, theology, many of the hard sciences, and I had to even get into art and music before I began to get what I considered to be an overall perspective of what I thought was happening. Now, I must tell you, what I'm sharing with you this evening is my opinion. It's a result of 30 years of my synthesis, my personal search, my personal odyssey. I don't want one of you to leave this room this evening believing anything I may have said because I said it. But I would like to have you leave this room this evening with an enhanced, piqued curiosity so that you'll go out there and do your own research, inform yourselves as I did, and tell yourself from researching this what really is going on and reach your own conclusions. Don't accept mine. I challenge you to do your own research, but I challenge you also, once you've really dug into this thing, you'll never be able to walk away from it. You'll never be able to put it down, and you will never, ever be the same. So I would say to you in advance, welcome to the club. Now, there are other things that happened over the years. When I began my research, I was curious about the hardware. Who they were, where they were from, why they were here, what it was all about.
When it comes to TLS, they have, I mean, you could think of them as like a spiritual version of the CIA, because that's pretty much how they're built, organizationally speaking, only they're a lot more powerful. People that have the abilities to levitate with the body, fly with the body, all of those things are part of humans and non-humans that are a part of TLS. When I say non-humans, there are extraterrestrial beings, physical beings that you could touch, that you can smell, that you can hug, that are a part of TLS. Some of them look like us, some of them don't. Some of them over time shift into looking like a human being to assimilate into Earth. Also in TLS, when it comes to their structure, because I didn't explain that, they have a branch in every major city in the world. Each branch or division is referred to as a chapter. So in New York, let's say, their main New York branch would be called their New York chapter. And when it comes to TLS as well, it has nothing to do with religion, it has nothing to do with race or age or gender or ethnicity or any of that. There's all ages, all ranges. They're very old people who are part of the organization. I know of two. One is over 400 years old. Another one is 613 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And they're human beings. They're very powerful human beings that have access to very high dimensions. They're in a state of gamma at all times. These people are not people that you would know exist. And if they don't want to be in a picture, you will not see them in a picture. They have sort of abilities that They can look at you and erase a certain memory that you have if they want to. It's complete control, but coming from a very high vibrational place.
Right. How far back does TLS go?
I could tell you that they've been in existence for over 5,000 years. And again, their power is something that's incredible.
And do they meet these chapters once a month or a week? Or
there are meetings. They have an office. You just won't know that it's a TLS office. They have an office in New York City. They have an office in Los Angeles. They have an office everywhere, especially in the major cities.
Right. Well, are they militaristic? Are they trying to seek any type of control? Are they similar to the Illuminati, being hidden behind closed doors?
Number one, they're not even close to a part of the Illuminati. They're the exact opposite, especially when it comes to their intentions. So again, ultimately, they're here to, if you want to talk about the idea of the Illuminati without putting names and all that out there, it's suppression of humanity, suppression of knowledge, suppression of spirituality, in order to keep us on a certain resonance that we don't understand what our true power is. What TLS does is the exact opposite. There's a certain timeline based on how ready humanity is at any given moment for things to be able to be shown. And it's one thing to hear about a shapeshifter, it's another thing to see one. So that's why I'm an advocate for the process of disclosure, because I think it's very important to first tell somebody that something strange exists before you show them that thing that exists, in order not to induce chaos. They don't want chaos. They're trying to bring us to this new level of awareness without causing problems along the way, to wake us up slowly.
Investigate UFOs anymore. The evidence for their reality, as Stanton has told you, is overwhelming. We have an abundance of data. We have an overabundance of data. We don't need any more data to prove the reality of UFOs or extraterrestrial spacecraft. What we do need to know is what's it all about? What is really happening? What is the meaning of their being here at this particular time? What is happening in the world today that they're interested in and involved in? What should we begin to pay attention to? Well, I'll share a little bit of what I think is really happening here. Now, before I left SHAPE headquarters in 1967, the SHAPE military people knew that there were 4 different groups that we were dealing with. There were 4 separate extraterrestrial intelligences involved. When I retired in 1976, the military knew, at least the U.S. military, and I am assuming the British as well, knew of at least 12 different groups that were coming and going and involved with us. I've been told by friends who are still working in high places, people who seem to know, people whose information I trust, that there may be well over 100 different groups coming and going from God knows where. The one that interested the generals the most in 1964 and 1967, the one that drove them up the wall, was the one group, 1 out of the 4, looked exactly like we do. And I don't mean similar, I mean exactly. So much so that they could sit next to you in an airplane or in a restaurant or in a theater, and you would never know. You would literally never know. And that bothered the admirals and the generals a lot, because we military have always been, we are trained to be paranoid. It's the nature of our game. The idea that there could be alien intelligence.
Targeted individuals on the ground and went out of their way to make contact. They can fly silently or project various types of sounds, can influence electrical devices remotely.
Wait a minute. This is no jet. I'm looking through here. It's just like, my God. What? Boy, you guys got good sound here. Lots of turbine sound.
I saw this light low to the tree tops off in the distance in that first enlargement, and then I took a picture, and then I moved my camera for the next shot, and the craft immediately turned towards me and flew at me in a snaking fashion. It came out of its way. It was traveling south down the valley. It turned towards me, went over me, and dove behind a low ridge, Thompson Ridge, then came through a gap and went back to its previous path down the valley. You can see here, superimposed on the image, darkened image of a daytime photograph, the lights came right on top of the trees as the craft flew over us. And this was the image of the reverse Doppler as it was coming towards us. And you can notice that the frequencies are dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping, reversed what would normally should happen with sound. And then when it was over me, it jammed my camera and jammed my audio recorder. So I get a gap right here. And then it turned on a different sound as it was moving away. And that's the sound it made as it was flying away. And you can see the spectrogram on the lower right. And the upper left is a spectrogram of the sound as it was approaching the camera and microphone. And that's a typical sound of a jet. These craft can take off. They take off typically from farm fields and forests, and their landings are also in farm fields and forests. On this particular night, 24 October 1994, a group of us were on West Searsville Road watching for something to happen. And we had George Filer of Filer's Files, who was a publisher, there with us, who also witnessed this. What we saw that night was a brilliant light in a farm field across from us light up and produce the orange aura around it as it intensified. Then it rose up, and the break in the light is due to it passing behind trees. Finally got above the trees, then it turned back around and flew back in the direction it had originally come, and then did a spiral all the way down into the ground. And it literally went right into a forest and disappeared below ground. This is one of the more amazing pictures I have of it, literally passing in between trees and through trees right into the ground. The last light is right there where the ground level begins. So how do you explain something like that? And this image shows where it came down and the forest it disappeared into, right here. And of course, it's right where the Indian Mound is located, and right where I documented that the entrance to the underground alien base is located. Aerobatic performance is done at night below 1,000 feet, altitude over populated areas, right angle turns. Here's some neat pictures of actual right angle turns that these craft can make. And the ones on the left, you can see here's the full shot image, and here's a close-up of it showing that the strobes are not displaced. Then those you have all of the strobes as it made its right angle turn. And then in this, on the 29th of April, we witnessed the triangle doing this U-shaped right in front of the sightings camera crew of cameras, and it made this double right angle turn as it was flying over us. Now for perhaps one of the better images or videos, movies that we took. A group of three of us, Dinah Bertrand, Mark Whitford, and myself, went up to Muddy Kill Lane to watch for something to happen. And when we got up there, these two black triangles flew over us. And then one of them set itself up at the end of Muddy Kill Lane, right here, hovering, waiting for us to notice it and turn our cameras towards it. Mark Woodford was later told, let me see if, this is the video, so I want to, yeah. Mark Woodford, who was a retired Navy officer, was later told by someone who claimed to work for Lockheed Skunk Works that we had been given a performance by the TR-3B. And these are pictures taken from my video showing the craft as it's coming towards us, and it's tilting as if banking, but it doesn't change its path towards us. And then it brightened its right light, very bright, and then dimmed it. The craft made a sharp turn and then flipped over onto its back and flew upside down and sideways as it moved away from us, showing in these particular diagrams how it moved. And then it seems it went in a straight line based on time exposures. Was taken by Dinah Bertrand, but the craft then flipped right side up as it was flying away from us, and then it started to dive down towards the ground. But the unusual thing about it, normally a fixed-wing aircraft, if it's diving towards the ground, gravity will increase its rate of speed and descent. And we can see based on the position of the strobes and counting them up that the craft was actually slowing down and not increasing in speed. And then when it got down to the ground, it flew along the top treetops, produced a burst of plasma light, and then flying sideways with its headlights pointed towards us, it disappeared below the treetops. And this is the path that it took when it flew around us, a very circuitous path, and disappeared about 2.7 miles away from us on the other side of the Wallkill River. The lights can move, they can move their lights independently of the craft and can time those movements to the thoughts and actions of people on the ground. So they can read people's minds. Here in this particular case, whenever I opened the shutter of my camera, typically the lights, the pilot would produce a tail that would cause a couple of his lights to jump up and make an obvious indication that he knew exactly where I was when I was opening the shutter of my camera. Also, the craft would create these loops through the sky that, if you notice, that in this particular case, the lights are moving in a counterclockwise direction, oops, and then clockwise and then counterclockwise, alternating as they go along. They also produced numerous spirals, and one could assume that they were trying to mimic or tell us that, you know, they understand our biological DNA. Here, for example, let me go back just. When this, on this particular event, we had a black triangle fly over Ellen and me, and it was at sunset, and you can see 3 separate time exposures. Each one, the lights jumped either at the beginning or just before the shutter was closed. So how did the pilot know I was closing the shutter of my camera? And here, beginning and end, beginning and end. And over here, when I splice these images together, according to the branches of this tree, you can see that the craft traveled straight, right through between the 2 time exposures, but the central lights were jumping off and on the side, and when the lights came back, the lights were spiraling through the air. That's quite amazing, being able to manipulate its lights in that particular fashion. And when we consider the reverse Doppler and frequency spectrogram, we can see that the frequencies decreased on approach to the microphone and then increased as the craft was flying away. And you can see a picture from Ellen's video here of what the craft, outline of the craft based on its lights. And after it arced over us, it dove behind some trees across a field. Finally, the last part of this talk is about a buried alien probe entombed in Ordovician black shale below the Jewish cemetery. This was something that I discovered very early when I started doing my magnetic map of the area, and I came down Route 52 between Walden and Pine Bush, taking measurements every 10 paces, and I was getting very unusual spikes of energy, magnetic energy, that were not normal. And I went and took the instrument back to the lab, and they checked it out, and it was fine. And when I came back out a few days later, there were no spikes. But what I discovered is that right next to the Jewish cemetery, over here by the entrance, there was a tree, and that tree had a magnetic beam coming out of the ground that was producing some extraordinary magnetic spikes. I'll show you those in a moment. And Ellen Crystal saw a triangular craft hovering over the cemetery. For what purpose, one has to wonder, unless it was communicating with what's something below the ground. And when I mapped these magnetic beams that were coming out of the ground with my proton magnetometer, they formed a perfect isosceles triangle. And others had seen some sort of a light beam coming out of the center of this object. Notice its size, 565 feet on a side. That's enormous. And I knew that it had to be below ground, and we eventually got the History Channel bring out a ground penetrating radar, and we did a scan right across the side of it, and saw the image of the probe underground, about 9 feet below the surface. Here this map shows where it's located, and what I hypothesize is that a triangular probe came in, circled around a group of islands in the sea, and landed on one of the islands and stayed there, remained there. Now, what is really extraordinary is that it's still functioning today, after 400 million years. It's sending these magnetic pulses out into the space every time the constellation Bootes is overhead. And this particular image shows where one of these beams was coming out of the ground. And this is the first image that graph that I made showing the spikes. Normal background magnetic levels are down here, but notice on the scale on the left, I mean, you're getting 10 to 11,000 gammas, which is extraordinary, pulses coming out of the ground in this beam of light. And I was able to move around with my magnetometer and find 3 or 2 more of these locations which produce the beams, magnetic beams. Here we can see the History Channel when they were out there, and I superimposed where the beams were coming out, the central beam in the middle of the triangle, and then 2 of the ones at the corner coming out. And the reason it's still functioning is because it's nuclear powered. And here's whenever this constellation Bootes is overhead is when, and here we have the Bootes Void, which is located in that same location in the night sky. So this 6 notable anomalies have been observed over and around the triangular magnetic array. A very large triangle, a craft reported by Ellen Crystal in 1991, hovered directly over the array and cemetery one evening. Witnesses, Phil and Lynn Martin, observed a tracking beam of light rising from between the 3 magnetic sources, which tracked a low-flying commercial airliner as it passed over the cemetery and then disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Strange sounds and rapid drops in air temperature have been reported at the cemetery near the transmitter array The author has experienced such drops in temperature and popping sounds, like a vacuum seal being broken, coming from the magnetic transmitter located at the cemetery entrance. The ground around the magnetic source array is sometimes unusually warm, enough so that it rapidly melted snow banks along the road in front of the cemetery. Pictures below were taken by Phil Martin in March of 1994, and you can see the snowbanks melting and water running along the road. Sue Mann reported feeling vibrations and a distinct humming coming from the ground within the cemetery one night. Plants and animals have grown and behaved strangely in and around the cemetery magnetic sources, including plants that grew downwards and towards one of these energy sources, and worms and insects were seen that actually glowed during the night. And right here we can see where these wild onion plants were growing vertically as they normally would, but then something happened and they suddenly turned around and started growing back towards the ground, indicating that they were tracking some source of energy. And the the Geiger counter picked up that kind of radiation coming from one of the magnetic sources. And the other amazing thing, not only did 2 of the underground sources produce magnetic spikes 3,000 to 7,000 gammas above or below background, but when the gradiometer sensors, now there's 2 sensors at the end of a long pole, were oriented in different directions, they detected different signals coming from the same source, which means polarized signals. Such sophistication rules out a natural source and an artificial human source, because the signals were too strong, focused, and directed or beamed out into space. You can see several of the 3 different types of patterns that I got on the same day measuring these different signals coming out from each of the 3 beams that were coming out of the ground. And then the History Channel came with Bill Burns, and they wanted to check it out to see if there was anything going on below ground. And here again is the image of how this craft was laid out based on the position of the beams coming out of the ground. And this is what the raw data from the magnetic, from the GPR, ground penetrating radar. And off to the left, it's normal layered bedding, and then on the right, these 2 show there's something disturbed in this particular area, distinctly disturbed, and an anomaly right at the edge, an edge effect, where different compression rates that indicate that the craft was not being compressed when it was buried, whereas the sediments around it were being compressed. And this is a simplified, idealized, or stylized illustration showing where the edge of the craft about 9 feet below the surface. And it's still functioning after 420 million years because this mining probe is nuclear powered. It sends signals out into space whenever the constellation Bootes is overhead. Thank you very much. So we're not alone. We are definitely not alone. And we have never been alone. And what is amazing is that, the military knows about it, largely because I put this information on my website, and they were constantly looking at my website. And even a caravan of military trucks came out and parked next to the cemetery one day, so the locals saw it happen, and Army soldiers in fatigues went into the cemetery, dug holes in the ground, and put sensors, presumably sensors in the ground to measure what was going on. So they're very well aware that something amazing is there. And what is just mind-boggling is that SETI really wants to know how the ET is communicating across the distances between stars. All they have to do is set up their instruments on top of this, and they'll find out. But have they? No. Any questions?
Yes, thank you. I really enjoyed your talk. You stated that, you showed at night a vehicle coming in behind a commercial building. Did you or anybody else ever go over there in the daytime to see if they could find anything that was strange from the ground?
Well, what I was trying to stop the movie to show you a satellite view of that actual area and what was there. And there's a big commercial warehouse just to the north of where it disappeared, and there are other commercial buildings to the south. But I even suspected that maybe it was landing and going to be then wheeled into one of those hangars, and it could have been some sort of a secret military craft. I don't know, but I went over there another day and checked it out, and there was nothing unusual. Thank you.
Wow, so many questions. So, wow, what a talk. So you said that these things can read your mind and they knew when you were out there. Do you think that they put on this performance specifically because you and only you were there? They hadn't done this for anybody else, or because there's a lot of high-techy equipment that you had out there to measure all this stuff. So did you feel that this was why they were putting on this display?
It's possible. That they knew that they could communicate with me telepathically. I did an experiment to determine just how they knew that I was opening the shutter of my camera. And I would get these tails or oscillations in the time exposure of the lights just after I opened the shutter. And I eventually figured out if when I was making a recording, I had a lavalier mic, I had my shutter button in my one hand and the camera in my other, and I was saying open shutter, close shutter out loud. And I had audio recording that while it was happening, so it would have a very detailed record of what the time for each of the time exposures I was taking. And then I realized, well, maybe they're listening to me, okay? So I stopped talking, and they still produced this oscillation when I opened the shutter. I said, how is that possible? Then I realized I had my self-talk, public talk in my head. So when I stopped that, the lines were perfectly flat. And that told me that they were reading my mind.
And how many occasions of all the many, many occasions you went out there did you get this sensation?
Almost every time.
Oh my God, wow, okay. Wow, and did you also, another side question, do you determine the shape of this Manta device based on the motion of the lights? I mean, you didn't actually you didn't see it like in the daytime?
Oh no, when it was overhead, directly overhead, it was kite-shaped and it had a tail on it like a manta ray.
Three-dimensional.
Yes, and also it was stealth black, but sometimes the sky with the moon out was lighter than the manta ray itself, so you could see the silhouette of it very clearly.
Yeah, very good presentation. Really enjoyed it. Following on to what he just...
Today on Cosmic Disclosure, we are with Ricardo Gonzalez, author and researcher from Peru who has experienced multiple direct contacts with extraterrestrial species called the Reptilians. Today, we are talking about different types of contact. Ricardo, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Emery.
You have had direct contact in the physical and 3D level with the Reptilians. How did that work?
Yes, over the years I've had physical contact with these extraterrestrials with human appearance. And these experiences have also happened in the company of other witnesses. I'm not the only one who has found themselves face to face with these beings. However, the question is, how do these contact agreements work with an extraterrestrial entity? When I've had to share my testimony with the media, sometimes they've labeled me as being abducted by extraterrestrials. I would try to correct the journalist, saying, I was not taken against my will. It was a contact by mutual agreement. How does this work? They extend an invitation to those people who they feel would be appropriate for an experience. When I say people who are ready for an experience, I don't mean people who are more evolved than others. I mean people who can handle the experience and who would also be willing to talk about it. What would be the point of having an extraordinary contact experience if afterwards, due to fear, you keep it to yourself? So having contact depends a little more on them than on us. Obviously, having this type of relationship over time with extraterrestrials, some of us had to go through a training which took years for some of us. I had a training for almost 3 years in order to see one of these beings for the first time. This training consisted of meditation and concentration techniques, and also of education. I changed my paradigms, my perspectives about possible encounters with extraterrestrials. And at the final stage of this training, these beings suggested that we go to the mountains or deserts completely alone for several days, under all types of conditions, so that we could face our fears, our loneliness, so that we could hear ourselves. I went through all of that before I saw them for the first time.
What were some of the challenges, Ricardo, through those 3 years that you found were a little difficult to get through? If you could explain to our viewers.
I think, and I'm going to be very honest as always, Emery, what was the most difficult for me at first was to be alone in the desert for several days. Because we humans are not used to being alone. We are social beings. That's why the pandemic of 2020 affected us so much, like a negative emotional contagion, due to social distancing and the lockdown. We humans are social beings, Emery. So being in the middle of the desert 3, 5, 7 days alone was really hard. In the middle of nowhere with nothing around for miles. I began to feel great discomfort. Yet I didn't know why I was uncomfortable.
What other types of contact are there that you can share with us?
Aside from these physical encounters that I always describe in my interviews, for which I went through the training that I just described, there are other types of contacts and encounters with these beings. One of them that we discussed is the dimensional portals. Another is telepathic or mental communication. Another way of contact is through the dream world, where you can project your consciousness to other realms of reality, even though it sounds unbelievable. Many esoteric groups call this astral body projection. There are also contact experiences that are stimulated by sound, whether through mantras or power words, as was done in ancient India, or through music, just like what happened at the end of the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which, by the way, is based on real events.
There are, of course, the three-dimensional contacts that you have, but there's also interdimensional contacts. Can you explain that?
Basically, there are two types of dimensional portals in contact experiences with extraterrestrials. The planet's natural ones, as we spoke about in another episode, and the artificial ones that these extraterrestrial beings can generate. Extraterrestrials refer to artificially generated vortexes as sendras, and there are 4 kinds of sendras, due to their physical and energy characteristics, and due to the experience itself within those vortexes. The first 2 sendras, type 1 and type 2, are more physical. You can see energy with greater clarity, almost as if it was a bright, compact fog, and you can put your hand in it, and you no longer see it. And temperature and characteristics within that dimensional portal are different than the context where you were before. In the type 1 experience, it tends to be individual. The energy is organized by the extraterrestrials for just one person. Type 2, up to 7 people may enter. And the next types, 3 and 4, which are called Himbra, a name that was coined by the extraterrestrials themselves. Large groups of people may enter, possibly more than 12 people, but the experience is more mental, more holographic, more spiritual. And the physical characteristics of the Sendra, Imbra together are also more subtle. They gave us a suggestion in training to face these dimensional portals. especially for type 1 Sendras, because all of the energy was organized for you, adjusted to your physical body, adjusted to your brain, your mind. So you should enter there as balanced as possible, because the influence of that energy field is greater. So if they tell us, on such and such a day there's going to be a type 1 Sendra contact on Mount Shasta, they would suggest a certain diet for 7 days, particularly a fruit and vegetable-based diet, no meat. They also would suggest avoiding alcohol, and of course, any substance that might generate an out-of-the-ordinary state of consciousness. They would say that our body had to be as pure as possible in order to withstand large energy fields. And the extraterrestrials were right. There were people who said, I'm not going to follow a diet for a week, and I'm not going to be fasting the day of the contact. And when they would face the experience, they would feel sick, they would get headaches, they would throw up, and they would fall asleep. The more energy field influence you have, the more prudent you should be about what you drink and eat.
There are very intelligent people out there that say they talk to extraterrestrials in their mind. Is that some sort of contact?
Of course, we're talking about telepathy, but if either of us goes to a psychiatrist right now, and we tell them that we are speaking mentally with an extraterrestrial entity, they would probably prescribe something for us. They might think that we're crazy. However, we do need to make a distinction between hallucinations and mental disorders and authentic contact experiences that occur within the context of telepathy. The word telepathy comes from Greek. In Greek, tele means far or distance, and path in Greek means something like a sensation or a symptom, or a disease or symptom. So telepathy could be described as transmitting something, a sensation, a sign, a symptom, over distance. It's not a language. It's not structured like English or Spanish. It's a collection of information, feelings, images, sensations. But if it comes to you, your brain will encode it in your native language, which is English. If I receive it, I will comprehend it in my native language, Spanish. That's why telepathy is the universal language of the cosmos. But there's an important point here. How can I confirm that telepathic contact? Because anyone can say, I'm receiving telepathic messages from extraterrestrials. Are they really receiving them? Anyone who says, I remember my past lives, are they really remembering that? If someone says, I'm channeling this information and this is my truth, are they really channeling it? How can you prove it? Because if we fall into that, if it resonates with you, it's true, that's a little dangerous, because it's all based on your faith and your perception. You may resonate with the charisma of that person, but not with the purity of the phenomena itself. What these extraterrestrials suggested to us is to have an element of verification. That proves that the telepathic communication was authentic. Within the types of contact, in order to confirm that these telepathic experiences are real, we would ask these beings for a physical sign. For example, I remember that in Peru, something extraordinary happened in 1999. I had only been receiving these telepathic messages from the extraterrestrials for a few years. I had had small but important confirmations, and I had even had direct contact with them. Then suddenly I started receiving a chain of really important messages full of information. This information would come to me telepathically. I would hear the information in my own language in my head, and I would write it down in a notebook so that I wouldn't lose the information. I said, they're going to have to confirm this. And they told me that in the first few months of 1999, there was going to be a wave of UFO sightings that was going to be filmed by a lot of TV networks, and that these objects were going to fly over the capital of Peru, over the city of Lima. And that's what happened. They appeared on the dates that they said, right in the middle of the city of Lima. They were filmed. And the Peruvian Air Force had to create an office for UFO investigations, which didn't exist before that. I was invited to the opening ceremony of that military office. So all telepathic contact at some point needs verification, physical proof, a concrete sign, or that their information may be verified correct over time. That will give you the confidence to continue that telepathic connection.
In high gear in 2012. It's slowed down now, but not off yet, unfortunately.
Does it have to do with the New World Order agenda, elimination of human population, etc.?
Yes, it's part of the New World Order.
Okay, wow, so you came back for that. Now, what do you mean the end times? I understood that 2012 and all that only meant the ascension process.
In reality, it is an ascension process, as you said. The problem is that the Cabal used the 9/11/2001 as a start or heating up of the negative plan.
So, among other reasons, that's why you came?
Yes, and there isn't just one reason, it's many.
Can you give me the other reasons of why you are here?
Solving the problems of Earth is not something we can do from outside. It has to be done from inside. So what we do is to point things out to people so they will, in turn, see more. Investigate on their own until a tipping point in consciousness is achieved. And then things will start to turn towards the positive. And you don't have to awaken the masses. Don't worry about that. All you need is to awaken a key core of people. The rest will follow. And they will follow because they are not even real people, but manifestations within the mind of the few real people. We are on a massive contact campaign now to give information that will resonate with some people. It may not resonate with most, but it doesn't need to. All we need is to activate a few key people. Then a chain in reaction will occur.
But after it resonates with them, is that the purpose of the contact? Just for it to resonate? The resonance is enough?
As it resonates, it fulfilled. It makes those key people understand who they are. They will be in alignment with their true self and will start to manifest a different reality for themselves and therefore for the rest of humanity or for the world. As they manifest, they change the world. They terraform. Those key people are manifesting all the reality you see. What I mean is that if you have 7,500,000 key people and they all understand what's going on, then they will manifest a new reality for all. Because the remainder of the population on Earth is just more matrix. As they are just more matrix, they are the product of the manifestation of those mentioned key people. We or anyone else cannot come into Earth shooting at all the negatives and cleaning the place, setting a new holographic government up, and all because it won't last. It won't last because it has been done that way before with horrible results. People tend to make us into deities. We are not. We are messengers. That's the very meaning of the word angels. And for hundreds, if not thousands of years, they've been pinning that angel thing on us over and over again. That's because the people of Earth are brought up that way, to look for a parent to take care of them. And in a way that could be used to describe us versus humans. We are a race who is self-responsible. Therefore, we are adults. The humans, on the other hand, don't know how to be responsible. The people of the earth have to be told what to think, what's right and what's wrong, who to listen to. First, the father and mother, then the teachers in school, then the bosses at their jobs, and the priests, and the politicians. They are guided all the time and don't know how to make their own decisions. They are in a hive mind, at least most of them. So they must learn how to grow up, be self-responsible. The humans must be the ones who transcend the oppressors. Not us. We don't need the credit. We know who and what we are. The humans must do the work. But going back to why we are here exactly now. We are here to help and aid the liberation of souls and minds on Earth. We are also here to aid and study the ascension of Earth from a scientific point of view. And many of us come here for personal reasons as well. Apart from that, but related, we are here to place star seeds on the surface to aid the awakening of humankind from the inside.
Is there another reason you are here? You said it is to help us ascend, but is it important for you that we ascend? Or is your helping us purely altruistic? The question is why? The deeper why. Is it perhaps that our presence in 5D is needed for some reason?
The real population of Earth is made of star seeds, even if they have been on Earth several or thousands of incarnations. They are all star seeds because they don't originate on Earth. They are source. So essentially, the real people on Earth are us, all our family, and we cannot be truly free if someone else is oppressed. Also, many of us are there and here at the same time. We want to get all our timelines, variants out. And yes, you are needed in 5D, because 5D is home as it gets outside the non-physical existence.
You said you cannot be truly free if someone else is oppressed. You don't feel yourself to be a free race, with us oppressed?
Complicated answer. My people say and feel they carry a lot of karma. Things like nuking Mars, for example. So they feel that this cleans their karma. The problem is that the karma concept is wrong. You don't have to carry bad karma. You do only because you choose to do so. You liberate karma when you understand the why your past events took place. You overcome karma when you accumulate and process sufficient wisdom to let it all go. From that point of view, we are here only because of altruistic reasons.
And you volunteered to come here?
Yes, it's strictly volunteer. Mostly it is the young and idealistic Taigetans who come here. The older ones prefer other things.
Are other planets in a similar situation to ours? And are you helping them too?
Yes, there were exactly 9 other planets in similar condition, 10 in total. But none of them are in such a critical condition and are as relevant as Earth is. Now, Earth and another are the only ones that remain in such a condition. The other one is Venus, but the problem there is related to Earth.
Why is Earth so important?
Because it's closer to us and to a very large variety of species, because it's full of their star seeds, and we all must take care of our own. Also for strategic reasons. This is the negative stronghold. If Earth's negative forces are defeated on Earth, the other planets in trouble will also be liberated. The other planets are only nodes of the Earth's cabal. Mars and Venus, for example. Earth is the key planet.
Key in this quadrant, you mean? Because the universe is very large.
Yes, this quadrant and problem of negative infiltration.
Can you specify the problem of negative infiltration, please?
The negative forces going in to peaceful planets to overtake and dominate the indigenous population using lies and mind control for service to self purposes.
So this is a key planet for them also. Why so much interest in Earth from both sides?
That's right. See it as the negative forces' headquarters, and also because in other positive timelines, Earth is also the headquarters of the Federation. It's the negative forces' headquarters and the Federation headquarters at the same time.
Now, this is interesting. You mean we are the headquarters of the Federation in other timelines? So is it that by helping us here now, you are also saving the Federation in other timelines?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's all concentrated here.
And why are the negative ones interested in the 3D planet? Or you mean they made it 3D?
We, the Federation, made it 3D. The negative forces only hijacked it and used the 3D in their favor. We didn't intend it to make it such a difficult place.
Going back to not feeling free, as it is still on my mind. You said, and we cannot be truly free if someone else is oppressed. Does it mean you feel compassion for the humans? Or you help just to be free yourselves? Or is it all connected?
It is connected. The concept that we are all one is very clear from here. We are a very empathic race, and we suffer in the shoes of others as in our own. So we do it because we can do something about the problem. If we do nothing, it makes us as guilty as those who perpetuate the problem, because we do have the solution.
I imagine that you can provide the solution within the limits of the laws.
Yes, correct. And the problem is that many may not understand the solutions, as it's very metaphysical. In short, though, you change the perception of the real people who are manifesting the matrix from the inside, and you solve the problem. The problems on Earth are the external reflection, mirror of a split and traumatized self of the real people manifesting the matrix.
The real people here are the ones manifesting and maintaining the matrix, mind control to do so. The matrix imposed by the negative ones. And to change our perception consciousness is to reprogram the matrix from within. I think I understand.